11 animals. That's all it took. In 2009, a small team of scientists drove crates of live beavers across Scotland to a remote loch on the rugged west coast, a place called Knapdale, deep in Argyll, and released them into water their species hadn't touched in 400 years. The researchers expected a ripple effect. What they got was a tsunami of ecological change so profound it left hydrologists, biologists, and government officials scrambling to explain what they were seeing. It all started with 11 animals and a river that had forgotten how to be wild. To understand why this was such a massive deal, you have to understand what Scotland lost when the beaver disappeared, and it was far more than just a cute animal with a flat tail. Castor fiber, the Eurasian beaver, was once as common across the British Isles as the white-tailed deer is in suburban America today. They were everywhere, shaping rivers, building wetlands, managing water flow in ways that no other creature on Earth can replicate. Then came the fur trade. It sounds almost absurd now, hunting an entire species to extinction to make fashionable hats. But that's exactly what happened. Driven by insatiable European demand for waterproof felt and a medicinal oil harvested from beaver glands, hunters wiped them out. The last wild beaver in Scotland was likely killed sometime in the 16th century. For 400 years, Scotland's rivers ran straight, fast, and uninterrupted. Without beavers to slow them down, water scoured the riverbeds, washing away the gravel beds where salmon spawn and drying out the surrounding land each summer. Scientists call this kind of place ecologically destitute. It looks green and alive on the surface, but underneath, the system is hollow and struggling. The river in Knapdale was a ghost town for biodiversity. The water rushed through too fast to support diverse insect life, which meant fewer birds, fewer amphibians, and a quiet that felt deeply, ecologically wrong. So what happens to a river when you remove the animal that built it? It forgets how to behave. The scientists behind this project, a collaboration between the Scottish Wildlife Trust and the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, weren't just trying to save a species. They were trying to jumpstart the engine of a broken machine. And this was no small experiment. The Scottish beaver trial was the first licensed mammal reintroduction in United Kingdom history. If it failed, it could set back rewilding efforts across Britain for decades. The pressure was extraordinary, and the clock was already ticking. These weren't just any beavers. The team captured them specifically from the Telemark region of Norway, chosen because their genetic profile closely matched that of the original British population. Getting them there was an ordeal. You have to trap animals that weigh up to 60 pounds and live in lodges that are essentially submerged fortresses. Then you quarantine them for months, rabies checks, parasite screenings, dental exams. Then you put them on a plane. Tucked in cargo, 11 of the world's most industrious rodents, animals famous for their ability to chew through wood, metal, and plastic, were heading to a country their ancestors hadn't known for half a millennium. Once in Scotland, the team carefully selected release sites with abundant food, willow, aspen, and birch, and riverbanks suitable for digging burrows. The first family was released at Loch Coilbar in May 2009. The crates were opened. The beavers hesitated. They sniffed the Scottish air, which their kind hadn't breathed since the reign of Henry VIII. Then, one by one, they slipped into the dark water and disappeared. For the scientists standing on that bank, that was the easy part. The hard part was everything that came next. Would they stay? Would they survive? Or would they recognize, somewhere deep in their DNA, that this was a place where they were needed? The team spent years trying to find out. Radio tags in the dark, infrared cameras trained on lodges, tracking every twig placed and every channel dug. They were, in every practical sense, studying a construction crew that never clocked out. The thing that stunned the scientists wasn't just that the beavers survived. It was how fast they went to work. Beavers don't build dams because they enjoy construction. They build them out of pure survival logic. Raise the water level high enough that the entrance to their lodge sits safely below the surface, away from predators. They look at a rushing stream, run the calculations in whatever passes for engineering instinct in a rodent brain, and they start cutting. Within weeks of the first release, the landscape around Loch Coilbar was already changing. The trees came first. Beavers fell them using only their teeth, a process that sounds destructive but is actually brilliant for the forest. They coppiced the trees, meaning they cut them to the stump, and the tree responds by sending up a dense spray of new shoots. Think of it as a haircut that makes the hair grow back thicker. The result is a dense, low thicket along the riverbank that is actually more valuable for biodiversity than the single old tree it replaced. Those felled logs go into the stream. The beavers weave them with mud, stones, and grass, using their flat tails as trowels to pack everything tight. The dams hold back water, creating a series of ponds and slackwater pools. And this is where the physics of the river changes completely. Before the beavers, fast water, erosive, scouring, a torrent that carved through the landscape and swept everything, sediment, eggs, insects, out to sea. After the dams, the water spreads out and slows down. Sediment settles. Clean gravel accumulates upstream, the exact substrate that salmon and trout need to spawn. The anglers who feared the beavers would block the fish runs got the opposite result. The beavers were building spawning grounds. The deeper pools became nurseries for juvenile fish. And when the rains hit hard, the beaver ponds acted like a parking garage for water, storing the flood upstream, releasing it slowly, so the towns downstream didn't flood as violently. Hydrologists watching the water level data kept checking their instruments. The numbers didn't seem possible. The beavers built it all for free. Then the animals came. Once the dams were up and the water levels rose, the wetland began to wake up. Standing water means dead wood in the water, which is a magnet for aquatic insects. Beetle larvae, caddis fleas, and dragonflies appeared in numbers that hadn't been recorded in the area for decades. And where insects thrive, everything else follows. Birds arrived first: warblers, flycatchers, and swallows, drawn by the sudden abundance of prey. Then the amphibians. Frogs, toads, and newts need still water to breed. In a fast-flowing stream, their eggs get washed away. In the beaver ponds, they found paradise. Amphibian populations in the trial areas skyrocketed compared to control sites without beavers. Those amphibians attracted herons and otters. It was like lighting a fuse on a biodiversity bomb. But perhaps the most stunning change was in the plants. Because the dams raised the water table, the ground around the river stays wetter for longer, even during dry spells. Moisture-loving plants flourished: sedges, rushes, water mint. These plants stabilized the riverbanks, preventing collapse during heavy rain. The whole landscape became spongier, greener, and more complex. The scientists had expected measurable change in 5 to 10 years. They were seeing it in one. The forgotten river was no longer a straight line on a map. It was becoming a braided network of channels and pools, not a river running through a landscape, but a river becoming one. It would be dishonest to tell this story as a fairy tale with no friction. There was real conflict, and it was legitimate. As the beaver population expanded, some animals escaping the trial boundaries and colonizing nearby farmland, tension with landowners escalated. A beaver doesn't distinguish between a wild willow tree and a prized orchard. Beavers are equal opportunity engineers. Fields were flooded. Drainage systems were dammed. Farmers who had managed this land for generations found themselves sharing it with government-sponsored rodents they never voted for. Can you blame them? Honestly, no. The Scottish government was caught in the middle. Years of public consultations, scientific reviews, and heated debate followed. Some beavers were shot illegally by angry landowners, which triggered public outcry. The science teams developed practical mitigation strategies, including a device called a beaver deceiver, a pipe threaded through the dam that regulates water levels without destroying the beaver's home, but building trust with farming communities took years. This tension exposed a fundamental challenge in modern rewilding. There isn't much true wilderness left. We live in a managed landscape. You can't reintroduce a keystone species and expect it to respect fence lines. The beavers were going to go where the water took them. And the water goes everywhere. It's the same lesson America learned when wolves came back to Yellowstone in 1995. The ecosystem benefits were transformational, but the friction with ranchers was real, complex, and took years to navigate. Nature doesn't negotiate, but the data doesn't care about politics. And eventually, neither did the government. In 2016, Scotland made history. The European beaver was declared a legally protected native species, the first time a mammal had been officially reintroduced to the United Kingdom and given full legal standing. It was an admission, backed by overwhelming data, that the experiment had worked beyond anyone's expectations. Water quality improved. Biodiversity numbers climbed sharply. Flood risk downstream decreased. Carbon storage in the wetlands increased because waterlogged soil traps carbon that drained land releases. And all of it was achieved not by engineers with concrete and machinery, but by rodents with teeth and instinct. The 11 beavers released into that forgotten river became the ancestors of hundreds now living across Scotland. They proved something conservationists had argued for decades but never demonstrated at scale. You can't just protect nature. Sometimes you have to restore the processes that drive it. Walk that river today and you wouldn't recognize it. It is noisy, chaotic, messy, and absolutely alive. The water sounds different, slower, deeper, pooling into dark chambers between the dams. The air is thick with insects. Every few yards you find a gnawed stump, a dragged log, a fresh mud-packed wall. Evidence of the architects at work right now, tonight, long after you've gone home. Wales and England have since launched their own beaver reintroduction programs, citing Scotland's success directly. The ripple is spreading. As we face climate change and biodiversity collapse, the lesson from that quiet Scottish loch is both simple and radical. We need more beavers. We need more rewilding. We need to trust nature to do what it has always done, when we finally get out of its way. We spent generations believing we had to manage every inch of the natural world. Concrete every bank, dredge every channel, control every variable. 11 beavers proved that belief wrong. The forgotten river is forgotten no more. It is the most alive place in the forest. And it all started because a small team of scientists decided to roll the dice and see if nature could remember how to heal itself. The key to fixing our broken ecosystems was swimming in a river in Norway all along. It just needed a ride home.